Welcome to Ocean Deep Tech Day 2024. I would like to welcome all guests today here live and on the live stream. Ocean Deep Tech Day is all about where is science status quo, but also about where are we heading with future technologies. The Federal Ministry in Germany spent approximately 16.8 billion euros in research and development topics in 2021. This is a rise of 7.5%, and it's still rising. Universities spend at the same time over 20 billion euros on scientific and research topics. And our question today is, what can we actually build from all this money we spend on research topics? Today we will look at two main topics in the area of future technologies when it comes to ocean deep tech. We will look at data and we will look at ocean alkalinity. Two topics that are dealing with major future trends in the area of ocean deep tech. But we wouldn't be the Transmatech if we didn't have something special for you today. And we thought maybe we can ask AI to help us a little bit with the preparation to save some time. So I would like to give a warm welcome to Elin. Elin should actually now be here in the background, and maybe the technicians can start the video in the background. And Elin will help me today with my moderation work, and in a few minutes, the entire speaker intro will be done by Elin, and maybe she's running a little late. So. Hello and welcome. I'm Ellen, the digital twin of Leila.
Hi, companion. I'm here to bridge the gap between human creativity and technological innovation. Everything I say is also AI generated based on the CVs and presentation titles of our speakers. Let's dive into an exciting day of presentations where our speakers will share insights and ideas that are shaping the future. So, without further ado, let's meet our first visionary speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Fietzek. As the Senior Business Development Manager of Ocean Science at Kongsberg Discovery, Pierre brings a unique blend of expertise in marine physics and a deep commitment to fostering science-industry collaborations. His career spans roles at research institutes, startups, SMEs, and global corporations, always with a focus on advancing oceanographic technologies and applications. In his opening keynote, Pierre will discuss the critical importance of maturing the ocean enterprise. He will explore how this evolution not only drives technological innovation, but also delivers profound societal, economic, and environmental benefits. Please join me in welcoming Pierre Fietzek.
Wow, so that was an amazing introduction. Thank you very much, Leila. Thank you very much, Ellen. Thank you very much, everybody here in the room. Thank you very much, everybody in the live stream. Let's see whether I can live up to these expectations and have a nice introduction presentation to this very important and interesting topic. So there we are with the introduction slide, maturing the ocean enterprise and the importance of stakeholder collaboration. So there are two things that you should take home with at the end of the day, at the end of the presentation, and this is, what is the ocean enterprise? And secondly, why is stakeholder collaboration important? You had an introduction. My name is Per. I work as a business development manager at Kongsberg Discovery. Here's a little outline of the presentation I'm going to give. After motivation and introduction, we'll have the main block, which is about the ocean observing environment, with a little bit of a detour into what acoustics and digital platforms can already accomplish in that realm. Then we look into some numbers of the blue economy and see whether the ocean enterprise already shows up there or not, and what we can do to improve that. We look at the ocean observing value chain, have a look at what the dialogues with industry have achieved, and look at the recent publication, which is the so-called roadmap. We look into marine carbon dioxide removal. That will also be deepened with some of the presentations following. Then in the second main block, we'll look at how we can achieve a more industrialized ocean enterprise, how we can mature it, And also, finally, before concluding, we will look at what are the advantages of collaboration between science and industry. All right, a very blunt start, right? We know more than 70% of the Earth is covered by water. We know that the majority of the water, 96%, is in our ocean. And the ocean is important, very simply put. So it supports life on Earth. It produces the majority of oxygen. It delivers resources such as delivering food security to 3 billion people on the globe. It takes up a large share of the anthropogenic carbon dioxide that is emitted, and it is affecting the weather as well as the climate. This needs to be said just to highlight over and over and over again the importance of the ocean and the adjacent understanding. But it's not only the ocean as it stands alone. No, there is interaction between ocean and society. The ocean impacts society, but it's also society and humans that have an impact on the ocean. And to be put in a little bit of a different way, we can also say that there are several crises at the moment, and they are all linked or have a connection to the ocean. To start with climate, right? I mean, ocean is very relevant in the context of climate, so that's one of the views. The food, we just had it on the preceding slide. For energy production, more and more, the ocean is of high relevance when it comes to offshore renewables, for example. And not to neglect, there is the geopolitical situation, which generates tensions and has also a big importance with regards to the ocean. And there we have a transition to what our company does. Kongsberg is a large technological corporation. We deliver technical solutions from the deep sea to outer space. We are a Norwegian international corporation. The Norwegian state owns more than 50% of our company. We have 4 main business areas: maritime, defense, discovery, and digital, with almost 13,000 employees globally, and as I just said, active all over the globe. Meaning that we have our roots in technology, and we are understanding ourselves as facilitators to help our customers achieve their goals. Specifically, I'm working in this business area called Kongsberg Discovery, and within Kongsberg Discovery, we have 4 business units: Ocean Technologies, which is all about acoustic sensors, multi-beams, sonar, single beams, anything you can do with acoustics to detect, quantify, and envision basically the underwater environment. CTEX is about positioning and data transmission of between platforms in the water. Uncrewed platforms is about uncrewed surface vehicles or autonomous underwater vehicles. So you see an image there of a Hugin AUV vehicles that are by now capable of spending 2 weeks underwater, traveling thousands of kilometers with a very, very good spatial capability. And then marine life technologies, which is about fishery equipment. But it is not just this hardware components, there is also a lot of digital components that comes to it now. So cloud solutions, interactions of the hardware with the digital space, this is emerging and becoming more and more important. We'll get back to that in a second. But I have this slide here to make one important point. Although we are industry, we are on the left side of this equation, meaning we are a facilitator, we are an enabler, we are a collaborator to science, unlike some other industries that are more on the right side of this equation, which would be the end users of certain technologies. So the size of a company does not say anything about where they are with regards to collaboration. That's also a very important aspect, because very often we are considered as, oh, you are industry, so you are on the right side here, you should pay for everything, etc., etc. And that's not the case. We want others to be successful. So there it said, right, we are a collaborator for developers and innovators in the blue economies. And what are the blue economies? Here is an overview of areas where we are active, right? We see offshore wind, we see offshore aquaculture, we see research science and hydrography, subsea installations, AUVs. There are many of them, but it's important to understand that the maturity level of these applications is different. There are some areas which are active for quite a while now that repeatedly use the same equipment. There are others which are more new, for example, offshore aquaculture, right? This is developing. And this maturity level is very important if it comes to the discussion of ocean observing. And this is where we look at now. We understand that the ocean, despite its importance, undergoes several pressures and several changes over recent years. We have the increase in population, we have the increase in carbon dioxide, we have an increase in acidity or a drop in pH, we have sea level rise, we have temperature rise, we have a decline in animal abundance, we have an increase in litter, unfortunately, but what we also have is an increased understanding of the ocean due to the deployment of various technologies. And why is that necessary? Well, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, we see that there is a strong connection between the SDG 14, which is life underwater, and the other SDGs. And there is even a publication that states that many Sustainable Development Goals may not be realized without achieving the SDG 14 for a healthy ocean. So ocean observation, data and services are critical to grow the blue economy as well as for society. And this falls into several areas. First is ocean management, so anything about ecosystem services, sustainable fisheries and biodiversity. The second topic is anything related to climate change and climate topics, forecast adaptations, etc., transport and tourism, and sustainable offshore energy. I've highlighted here biodiversity and climate change because these are two topics that are discussed in the highest levels of the United Nations. You know that there are these meetings with regards to climate and there are meetings with regards to biodiversity. So these are two topics that made it to the top and that are discussed by policymakers, and that's a very good entry point to get attention and to move forward and improve ocean observing. Where do we stand with regards to ocean observing? Well, we've got the global ocean observing system comprising data deliveries by 86 countries from more than 8,000 platforms. You can read the other numbers. It's important to understand that the global ocean observing system, GOOS, is an infrastructure and as such coordinates the global system and delivers not just the data or handles the data acquisition, but also aims at delivering solutions to end users. And again, there is another statement highlighting the importance of ocean data. And the question is, how will it continue from there, right? This system sounds massive, but it is by far not enough to have a good understanding and a good databases for delivering targeted solutions for several industries related to the ocean. So how can we look at this and how does it go on? Well, we see, luckily, that there are some changes underway. On academia and science side, we see that consolidation and harmonization is happening, right? The institutes on a national level and international level come more together. They have agreements. They organize themselves in institutions like the Global Ocean Observing System. And that's very helpful in the interest of a more mature ocean observing environment. There is also more structuring and organization visible through introduction of standards, best practices, the essential ocean variables, a very good achievement by GOOS. And these essential ocean variables are something to look at because the most mature parameters were physical parameters because they were measured for quite a while now, followed by chemical parameters and then succeeded by biological parameters. And the technological extent or the readiness level of measuring technology for physical parameters is fairly advanced, followed by chemistry, and the biological sensors are emerging. You might have heard about eDNA, environmental DNA. These are sensors that recently were added to the family, so to say, but there is promising development all going in that direction of ecosystem understanding, for which we will also hear more later on. So GOOS is also somehow in a transition towards an operational system going beyond this status of an infrastructure in the first place. Industry is also changing, right? Being just the delivering partner of equipment in the past, there is now more focus on information derivation. So it's not the hardware anymore alone. No, there is more solutions that really try to help the users get really the information out of a measurement and not just the pure raw data. And there is also something in the direction of economical sustainability, which I will highlight on the following slides. And then we have also the common trends, the societal importance and environmental awareness, and the growing number of platforms in the field which allow for the collection of more data. So we know that there is the Global Ocean Observing System. We see that there are some favorable changes. And is that already enough is the question? We'll see. But first we look at the economical sustainability. This is a slide that shows, so everything in that slide shows connections to where acoustic sensors are used and how they are used. So, for example, you see various different types of carriers. Autonomous underwater vehicles, uncrewed surface vehicles, buoys, research vessels, etc., etc., etc. And all of them can carry some of the acoustic sensors. And these acoustic sensors are used for example, detection and quantification of biomass, ranging from anything but larger zooplankton up to fish. But it's not only biomass and organisms that you can detect and quantify, it's also non-biological targets that you can detect and quantify by acoustics, such as oceanographic layers, sediment clouds. You can conduct seabed classification, detect gas bubbles, and also have a hint towards marine hazards. So you see, acoustic sensors are fairly versatile. And so here's my statement on this so-called economic sustainability. So you can access with the same sensors, with the same proven sensors, more and more platforms, more applications, and by that expand the user groups. In return, this leads that you have this versatility, that you can provide better service, you can provide better support, you can provide better improvements to the sensors because you have a large user group related to these tools. And then there is also, of course, an economy development related to it. And the data that is collected there is of relevance for several questions around ocean observing. This is one approach towards more data. There is also another approach towards more data, which is called accessible ocean technology, so affordable ocean technology, and also citizen science. That is something Toste will speak about. So that is one approach, so to say, high-quality sensors and trying to get them more widespread. And then there is also this accessible ocean technology approach where you want the sensors to be as affordable as possible and have a low barrier for entry and also get them into countries that are a little bit less developed. This is one development part with regards to industry and sensors, but there is also, and we are here in the digital week, so there is also digital developments happening. Again, I stay with that example of the acoustics because it's quite illustrative. So what you can do with advanced digital platforms at the moment is you can remotely operate these sensors. You have these sophisticated sensors on research vessels or on USVs, and you can then remotely access them, meaning that your specialist must not be on board. Something else is about processing, right? You have simplified processing pipelines. You can process the data by means of machine learning, by means of artificial intelligence, directly on the platform with the same workflows on the platform as at home on your desktop. And that also simplifies coming from data to information fairly quickly. Then it's all about organizing those massive data streams. If you look at a research vessel with a large amount of sensors, all of that data that needs to come together somehow needs to be organized, needs to be managed. And that's also something where digital solutions come in. And then also helping with complete monitoring setups where you have different platforms, different sensors, and you want to visualize that data in a nice 2D map projection or in a 3D environment, and this is also where these digital solutions help. So they help with operational efficiency through automation. They allow you to achieve an improved collaboration because they are agnostic with regards to sensors, with regards to platforms, and by that they allow you to realize more information. Okay, so let's try to see where we find ocean observing in the blue economy context. Well, the blue economy is comprised of several different industries. You see, for example, here offshore oil and gas, 34% in the year 2010 and projected to be around 21% of all the blue economy revenue going forward. Then we have something like offshore wind, which is going to grow. So all of these things are expectable, so to say. Industrial fish processing is also expected to grow. So that is not really surprising. The question is there ocean observing hiding somewhere in there? Or where is ocean observing in all of that? Well, ocean observing is not listed yet as a separate industry because it is supportive to many of the others. And that's something that we ideally would like to change, especially because the importance of ocean data is going to grow. And here are already some first studies about ocean enterprise, which is the basically a descriptive term for all the technologies, all the stakeholders related to technology and services linked to the acquisition of ocean data and derived information products. And for the US, we've got 8 billion. For the UK, we've got around 2 billion pounds. And for Canada, we've got 1.1 billion. So these are the first numbers from 3 individual national studies to give you a notion of what the importance of ocean observing is. I already mentioned it. The ocean enterprise is comprised of representatives from the private field, private sector, from the public sector, as well as from academia. And they all are basically linked to the same topic, which is about generating information products and collecting data. And here we already see the first component of the ocean observing value chain. It all starts on the very left with ocean technology, right? You need sensors, you need platforms. Somehow you need to get them into the field to collect data, which is the next one, observations. The observations will bring you data. And from the data, you can generate information products. And these information products are converted into end-user products and benefits, and they meet this need for the requirements related to ocean observing. There is the need for innovation in all of these different segments, and there is also business potential in all of these different segments. The orange circles at the bottom, their size indicates the market size at the moment, and you will see that the largest circle is with the first segment, which is observing technology. So the majority of technology, or the majority of revenue at the moment is generated through selling technology and equipment. You see, but you also see the arrows indicating the growth potential of these different fields. And you will see that the steepest inclination of the arrow is found on the very right, which is about this information products. So the more data we collect, the more data is available according to the FAIR principle, the more information products can be generated, and the more basically end users can be addressed with these solutions. So there's a lot of growth potential. Now we've learned a lot about it. We see that there is potential. Where do we stand? Well, there are some challenges. We have no consistent view on the technology needs. The market is still fragmented. Some sensors are bought in very small unit numbers. World market leaders are companies of 10, 15 people. So we are far away from an industrial status, despite the importance of ocean data. So that's very crucial to understand. That's also linked to aspects like lack of visibility of R&D efforts, limited partnering with industry, also duplication of efforts in different countries, which is to some extent a waste of important resources. We also must look at how can new commercial services be introduced in this environment, right? At the moment, science carries out many measurements, and the question is, will they be able to do that going forward, or do we need to change something there? Then there is high unit costs that should be overcome, and their system resilience with limited suppliers is also important. A mature market has, on the other hand, many advantages. We would have more clarity and planning capacity, growth potential. We would have enhanced manufacturing efficiency, and the demand for technological service would be fostered and innovation spurred. So the first box here indicates the advantages of a mature market for the instrument providers. For the people that deploy the sensors and operate equipment, well, for them, the price of the equipment would fall, and they could also make use of the aggregated demand power that they have, because by purchasing 10 sensors or 100 sensors, they have much bigger lever to negotiate better terms as if they only bought one. And then finally, society benefits through a more sustained observing system and an enhanced data flow in information products. The dialogues with industry is an initiative that we conducted and started several years back with the Global Observing System, the Marine Technology Society, the NOAA in America, and it is an endorsed Ocean Decade initiative. And we started with background definitions and basically formulating this understanding of the ocean enterprise. Then we conducted dialogues with more than 400 participants in 22 and 23 on the topics of instrument provision, the ocean multi-sectoral ocean architecture, information services, and also forward-looking. And this was the first format where the Goose directly interacted with industry, by the way. Then we synthesized everything. We organized all the input we got and put it into 4 different fields and other bullets here. And after that, there was a direct investment of 3.9 million in the US to really bring this idea more forward. And we now have realized the latest publication, which is a roadmap, which takes the information from the synthesis reports, weighs it, and basically gives something, produces a roadmap for achieving the important goals. And these goals are essential service, that the ocean enterprise is recognized to be essential for life and livelihoods, not just something nice to have, but something that is really of relevance and importance. We also want this to be visible and identifiable and recognized as a strong contributor to the global cross-domestic product, so recognized as an industrial environment of importance. And finally, a distinct market, right? It should be recognized as a distinct market sector. So if somebody tells you in the future, I work in the ocean enterprise, no matter whether they are scientists or industry, it's something that people should know about, like automotive industry or mobile telecommunication. Ocean enterprise should establish itself as such a term. And this is the major figure from the roadmap showing the focus areas in the middle: improving the marketplace, shaping the future, collaborations to grow, with challenges in the bigger bubbles, and then action pathways around it. I don't have time to go into it, but it's important to understand that this concept tries to bring forward the ocean enterprise in its totality. We are not taking out one aspect, for example, workforce development, and say workforce development is very important, or blue clusters or any other aspect. No, we have this bigger vision here and try to bring it forward. And please feel free to go to the website oceanenterprise.com. The team of supporters should be expanded. If you are interested in bringing forward some of these action pathways, please do so. And if you have existing initiatives, we would like to link it up, because this is kind of an orchestrating initiative, and we need to link to connect to existing initiatives. And as such, for example, we had one workshop conducted earlier this year on marine carbon dioxide removal. And we'll hear about that later in more presentations. But why do I show that here? Because marine carbon dioxide removal is a promising candidate to improve the marketplace. Why? Because this is a field that is supposed to grow, which is of high relevance, and it is significantly depending on ocean data as well. It all falls under this term of monitoring, reporting, and verification, MRV. And so this MRV concept is important to get trust, to prove that this works, and to basically underpin the effectiveness of these activities. And that's why baseline data is needed to enable effective regulation, and as I just said, to also build up the trust with it, right? So this is a very promising topic to bring forward this concept of the ocean enterprise as an example here. This concludes the topic of the ocean enterprise and the blue economy. Now let's look a little bit into this collaboration. Now we know the goals. Now we know what we would like to achieve. How do we get there? What can we do along that track? Well, my message is that science and industry should collaborate more to carve out the value of ocean data, to carve out the value of what we are doing in the ocean and what the ocean does for us. If we do that, we have enhanced clarity and a clearer market. We then have also industry getting more involved, right? Not just startups and SMEs, but also larger companies going in that field of data collection. We have more industrialized solutions with a drop in unit price, etc., all leading to more data. And with more data, then the whole circle starts again. So we've got the goal, we've got the understanding, and ultimately, on a very basic level, there is no competition between academia and industry, right? They are completely different with regards to what they would like to achieve, and this also goes in line with the distinct sectoral strength. So science can do things that industry can't do that well, and the other way around. So that's an ideal basis for win-win situations. We are also active in collaborations, obviously, and in projects. What we would like to leave as a message is that we should also try to think of very ambitious projects, right? We should not think very limited anymore. We should really have ambitious goals, international goals, and really think big with regards to initiatives linked to ocean observing. When it comes to this collaboration and this maturing process, you always have that chicken and egg question, right? This question between, okay, does the companies first need to have a big order, or can the order only come if the products are there? So that's always this question between a customer push and the technology and manufacturer push. And so this critical situation can be overcome by enhanced collaboration, because you go together into a project, you have a certain goal, you try to grow this market, as we saw in that circle on the preceding slide, and by that you basically avoid this challenge here and try to make the market bigger at first, because that gives you more power to really tackle these things. And there are different types of projects you can get engaged with, right? There is educational projects and training projects. There is basic scientific and basic development projects, but also applied and very targeted development projects. But there is also communication initiatives, because a lot is about dissemination, about getting out, informing the public, making a point what the importance of ocean data is and the relevance of the ocean. So it's not just that type of the collaboration, but it's also the communication efforts. And I put here a helix, because if science and industry manage to get along very well and successfully communicate their achievements and their goals, and they show that they have a good understanding and get along very well, you can make it this triple helix by getting government and the public involved. There is also quadruple and quintuple helix considerations, but the understanding is that if we as science and industry manage to convince and show, look guys, we've got a plan, we've got an understanding, this generates jobs, this generates high quality jobs for well-trained staff, it is of environmental importance, etc., I would bet that there is also more support from government side. And here on the last slide, before summarizing, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of some advantages that are linked to collaboration between science and industry. We start with science. In these type of collaborations, scientists and academia have a direct link to developers and product know-how. That is very, very valuable. Then they have a chance to learn about goal-oriented and cost and quality conscious working styles. Then a lot about engineering and product know-how, obviously an economic mindset, because in a company money needs to be earned differently than science applies for it. And then there is also this market and marketing know-how, although institutes are investing a lot in that as well. There's also a lot to gain on the industry side, right? Industry can use these type of collaborations to develop promising applications and business cases, investigate new markets with existing products or with to-be-developed products through targeted developments. They can benefit from high-quality, independent scientific assessments. Scientists are very good at disseminating results through various channels. And also, there is this workforce component, right, that people who used your equipment during a research project, for example, they will move on, and they will ideally keep this product in good memory. And finally, science is very experienced when it comes to project management, because this is what they do very, very well. So that is another advantage. So there we are at the end, and I would like to conclude by emphasizing again that ocean observation data and services are critical for growing the blue economy on the one side, but also for society in general. The ocean enterprise develops through aspects such as product sustainability, but also through this consolidation and the changes on the scientific side. And maturing the ocean enterprise holds benefits for all involved stakeholders, from academia, the private sector, and society. The dialogues with industry have led to the roadmap, which is really giving a clear way forward and should be investigated more. And MCDR is an important application in this context to improve the marketplace. Science-industry collaboration is essential in this context and holds many win-win potentials. And finally, we should also think about approaching significant and impactful projects going forward, because this would represent more the value of the ocean and ocean data. Thank you very much.
I think we have to work on Elon's timing a little bit, but maybe Elon is showing up on stage again in a couple of seconds. Let's see.
But I was supposed to get down, right?
Yes, you did the good job. Okay. As I said, I think Elon needs a little bit of training. Dear people up there from the
Thank you, Pierre, for setting the stage with such an enlightening discussion on the maturation of the ocean enterprise. Your insights into the intersection of marine science and industry are crucial for anyone passionate about sustainable ocean development. I am excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Toste Tanhua, a senior scientist in chemical oceanography at GEOMAR Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research, Kiel. Dr. Tanhua has dedicated his career to enhancing our understanding of ocean ventilation and the complex dynamics of ocean carbon, nutrients, and oxygen. Today, he will discuss his role in revolutionizing ocean observing and forecasting systems through the SOOP initiative, Shaping an Ocean of Possibilities. Let's explore how integrating oceanographic and climate data can unlock the future of our oceans. Please welcome Dr. Toste Tanhua.
So I'm going to see if I can get my presentation up here first. That seems to work. Thank you, Per, particularly for setting the stage in such a great way. My name is Toste Tanhua. I come from GEOMAR and been dedicated 10 years or 15 years of my career on ocean observing. And what Per just showed, the science-industry dialogue, and the paper he referred to a couple of times that Per was the first over on, was the critical elements that actually got us to write such a successful proposal to get SOOP funded. I don't think we would have managed to do that without that background information and that framing of the blue economy and the new blue economy and the importance of ocean observing in that context. One of the things that Per showed on one of the last slides was that science-industry collaboration is essential. And you see that already here in the title of SOOP, Shaping an Ocean of Possibility. And now the sailing boats has moved out of the picture, but there was one sailing boat there that sailed away, or they were motoring actually. And this is the basic concept of SOOP. The ocean is huge. 70% of the planet is ocean. Scientific vessels and robots and whatever we have are expensive. And there's no way the science and dedicated platforms can cover the ocean in that amount that we need to collect the data that we need for the information we need for sustainable management of the ocean. So SOOP is aiming at equipping non-scientific vessels and platforms around the world with instrumentation. And one reason that we can do that is that there has been a tremendous advancement of sensoric and sensors and technology the last 10, 15 years that allow us to do that. So why are we doing that? Why are we looking at these different aspects of ocean? What information do we need? So Per alluded to that there are issues, and you could say that the ocean is sick. He needs to go to the doctor. And when you go to the doctor, he probably will take some measurements on you, maybe your temperature, maybe your blood pressure, and take some blood values. This is exactly what we want to do. Taking this measurement don't make you, non-sick anymore, but it's the first step to actually get a treatment. You need to understand what is going on, and then you need to monitor if the treatment you are applied actually has the effect that you want to. And exactly the same is for the ocean. So we look at ocean warming. This year is an extremely good or bad, if you like, place to look at ocean warming. The ocean has never been as warm as it has been now. And every single day, the last year has been warmer than any single day that time of year ever. Oh, well, at least the last 100,000 years or million years or something like that. It's really happening a lot. We're losing biodiversity. We have ocean acidification, and we're going to hear a lot about aspects of ocean acidification. That is a consequence of ocean taking up carbon dioxide, which is an acid. Sea level rise. This is a map of, I think it's around here, Schleswig-Holstein, and you're going to see if you have a little bit of sea level rise, there's a lot of areas that either we put dikes up there for a lot of money or we give it back to the ocean. Oxygen, due to climate change and other factors, the ocean is losing a huge amount of oxygen. And we have, of course, the litter and plastic problem. These are just a few issues that we would like to monitor better. So what is preventing us from doing that in a good way? Well, we don't have sufficient ocean observing systems because they are driven by limited scientific efforts. We need that information for society, and the aim of SOOP is to engage non-science actors in that process. So Per alluded to some of that issues here. We have a very small market, and different companies are making great sensors, but they're making it in small series. It's hard for them to go up to that level of technology they would like to be easy to operate and so on. So most of the sensors are not interoperable. There's different standards for different companies, which you can understand how that happens. There's very few common interfaces between instruments. Many times the instrumentation is kind of stopped by prototypes. So if a company makes a few sensors, or even the GEOMAR, we're making instrumentation in very few series. And they are very complex and difficult to use. And all of these things are 6 things that SOOP wants to go out and change on this. So this is one of the 3 pillars of SOOP, to work with industry that makes ocean observing equipment, to make them easier to operate, cheaper, more lightweight, using less energy, and most of all being interoperable. Actually, we are developing a little bit of app for your cell phone, where you then, with that app and one interface module that we have, can operate sensoric from many different manufacturers. So how can you be part of this? Well, we talked about the ocean economy as a whole, and that's a huge number of the ocean economy: shipping, offshore energy, tourism, and so on. One part of that is what we call the blue economy, which has some sustainability aspect of it. So we are really looking at the blue economy, or the offshore wind and so on that are that. But the real thing here, and parallel to that, is the new blue economy. And that is the part of the economy that delivers the information to the to the ocean sector or the blue economy that they need to operate. In safety space, for shipping, tourism, you probably want to know if there are any dangerous algal blooms on the beaches before you go swimming, and things like that. These are part of the new blue economy. And I think one thing that Per said, and he said many good things, but one very important thing is that we want to move out of just being science for science. We're actually delivering essential information to society. Shaping Ocean Possibility is an innovation platform. It's not a project, it's an innovation platform funded by Helmholtz Association, distributed equally between the three centers, GEOMAR, AVI, and Herion. So it's all Northern Germany here. And we got a fair amount of money, and now we lost count yesterday. We were 36 people on the payroll for SOOP, working ahead to get this going. So, and we are funded now to the end of 25, and hopefully we have another many years on that platform to use that collaboration we have set up with the industry. So we want to create a major marketplace for ocean observing technology deployed globally by a variety of marine operators delivering the data needed for sustainable oceans. So that's a long-term vision. And the mission is that we will harness the curiosity and creativity of society, so not scientists, but society, all of you, to sample the ocean at scales that we couldn't dream of before, and creating the sustainable structures for transfer innovation observing technology. So we have been using sensors on private vessels for 10, 15, 20 years on a project base. So SOOP is really trying to scale up that, building the systems and infrastructure that you can scale up that. Rather than having 2 scientists working on 5 vessels, we want to have 2 scientists kind of operating hundreds of vessels to make observations by scaling up. So we can look at these nice triangles here. We're talking about technologies. We talked about that. We talked about value creation. So that is using that data for value creation, the information that comes out. And SOOP kind of stops there. SOOP delivers the data, but SOOP is not the task of creating information. But we enable creating information to other private sectors or industrial partners. We showed these pictures before, and I think this is coming from the GOOS, MTS, industry science collaboration, or the dialogue brochure, which was really helpful. And thank you, Per, for talking about GOOS, Global Ocean Observing System. I've been on the steering committee on GOOS for 10 years, and 7 of the last years I've been the co-chair of GOOS. So I'm really happy now to actually do something in this particular niche here. So who are interested in this? Well, communities, shipping, offshore energy, and insurance, really important. The insurance really cares about ocean information. If you buy a beach house in Florida, I bet you won't be able to insure that house, right? Because of sea level rise and increased frequency and intensity of hurricanes. Big issue, right? And that similar things are happening here in Europe too. It's not just Florida. Business and marine technology and data management. So we're looking at talking to industry here for shaping that market, getting a new market going. And as Per said, we know why we want to do that. We know how to do that. But the market hasn't really developed, and that is a chicken and egg question. How can we get that market going and roll it up and spin it off? And that is really, in the end of the day, what SOOP is all about. So we have these 3 pillars of SOOP. So one is working with the industry to create that sensoric that we need. The second pillar is working with the operators, the private sailors, shipping companies, offshore wind, aquaculture, to support them in installing sensors that are going to deliver environmental data. And the third pillar of SOOP is to take that data, transport it as fast as possible through the data management system and making it available. And we talk about fair, findable, interoperable, reusable, and something. So this is the technical aspects of data that we need to make sure that they are available. As a scientist, we of course think that this data is great. We can actually do our science with this data. It's not SOOP, but we are all scientists, so we're going to use the data to create new science and insights. But also society. I'm sorry I didn't translate all the headlines here, but the society will benefit from having more information about the ocean in general. As we know, the ocean and this ocean is really driving the weather. It's really driving the climate. It's creating a lot of economy, and we all like to go to the ocean, I assume. I do like to go to the ocean. So how can we do things here? So these are some of the things that we are focusing on SOOP in the initial phase, in the build-up phase to the end of next year. Looking at temperature, salinity, water quality aspect, microplastic, carbon dioxide, oxidant, and eDNA, and maybe colibacteria. So we are trying to focus on a few items where we can actually show success the next 2 years through the whole value chain, from actually having the question well defined to having the instrumentation to delivering the data. So what does it look like? Well, you may know this boat, the Malizia from Boris Herrmann. He's been operating a ocean pack from a company in Kiel called Fietzek for quite a few years now, and sailed around the world twice and got really good measurements. And we've been using that in science. And that is particularly interesting because they race through the Southern Ocean where there are very little data. So that makes big impact on our understanding of the fluxes of carbon dioxide to and from the ocean. And if you want to have a difficult platform to work on, you're probably going to go to an IMOCA racer that is really bumpy, uncomfortable. And these instruments were holding up, I think barely, but they were holding up, so we know we can do it. This is another small sailboat that happens to be mine. But this is just a sensor that we are putting, the SOOP sensor. It's a simple temperature sensor that transmits the data over long-range VLAN to our server at GEOMAR, sailing around in Kieler Bay or maybe to Germany or to Denmark or Sweden or something. We also look at the Global South. So we're working together with this organization, POGO, Partnership for Observing the Global Ocean, and they are engaging a lot with the Global South. So we've been in intense contact with the Global South and understanding what kind of observations do they need to manage their ocean, bit of ocean. And we are very hard working on developing this instrumentation and interfaces for the Global South. So as an innovation platform, we are very keen of having industry collaboration and partners. And that is just a few of the partners we have. I just heard from our innovation manager that just came here today that we signed a new contract with another company yesterday. So we are increasing the portfolio of partners towards working together for a better ocean, or rather a better knowledge of the ocean. We're using private vessels. So thank you by that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tanhua, for that comprehensive update on global ocean observation and the progress of the SOOP initiative. It's a pleasure to introduce Sergei Nozdrenkov, our next speaker and a visionary in the field of artificial intelligence and marine biodiversity. Sergei, a former Google engineer and the innovative force behind wildflow.ai, has taken his extensive experience in AI to tackle some of the most pressing environmental challenges. Today, Sergei will share his insights on how AI is revolutionizing our approach to marine conservation, from predicting coral bleaching to enhancing the design of marine protected areas. Let's give Sergei a warm welcome as he takes us on a journey into the intersection of technology and ocean conservation.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm trying to find how to enter full screen in German. So this is the ocean. It covers 2/3 of the planetary surface. It's home to 78% of all animals in terms of biomass, and it's extremely valuable. And this is a transformer. It's an example of AI architecture which together, it's kind of an algorithm, which together with other AI architectures, powering so many technologies like Google Translate, Shazam recognizing your music, comprehensive medical screening, and even self-driving cars. Also, Transformer powering these. All of these are foundation models from OpenAI. These are large-scale AI systems trained on massive amounts of data and adapted to perform various tasks like creating deepfakes or helping students to cheat on their homework. But also people working on foundation models for geospatial data, for physics, chemistry, and like robotics and many other things. In 2022, generative AI market was about $40 billion, and according to Bloomberg, in 10 years it will become $1.3 trillion in the next decade. So this talk will be about me leaving my dream job at Google and becoming homeless, trying to create a startup in the ocean biodiversity space with the goal of creating foundation models in biodiversity. So we'll mainly talk about oceans, biodiversity, and AI. In 2016, I started working at Google, mainly in Google Maps, stitching satellite images, and also our team was creating 3D reconstructions. So for example, this is the building which you can rotate. This is where we are right now. It was created in the team. And then I worked on the dark side, on the monetization, processing like petabytes of data. Then last 3 years worked at Google X, which is a moonshot factory. So we were listening for bees, buzzing, using IoT devices, and then trying to use machine learning to classify diseases of the bees. Are there any like ants in the colony? Is the queen happy? And like many other things. And right now we have a massive biodiversity crisis of insects. We have maybe 15% of insects left compared to what was 60 years ago. And one of the biggest drivers of biodiversity decline is the use of pesticides. So we decided to focus on pest management as a major kind of problem to tackle. What we were doing is basically we were taking big geospatial biodiversity data, trying to use AI to model, let's say, population dynamics, for example, when the outbreak of a specific pest is going to happen, so that we can take action. And, for example, instead of spraying the entire field with toxic chemicals, we could intervene earlier and maybe spray only a small patch or use like biocontrol or mating disruption strategies and so on. And then that was my previous job. I really love diving. This is me scuba diving in some other places. I'm really bad at swimming. I sink quite well, so I decided to work on my strength. And so I do free diving, and this is our free diving club we created in London. And the ocean means a lot to me, and unfortunately it's dying. So in general, yeah, we lost already almost 70% of all animals on the planet. And there is many problems in the ocean. So for example, bottom trawlers troll every year, like massive territory, like massive area the size of Brazil. We have a large Pacific garbage patch, which is the size of France, Italy, and Spain. So how do we stop all of this? How do we do better? Let me teach you how to become rich, but don't listen to me because I'm poor. But I think you need to earn more, and then you also need to spend less. And I think arguably like earning more actually matters more, but both of them are important. So same, in order to establish a healthy balance between humans and nature, we need to conserve and restore more, and we also need to destroy less. And I think in this situation, like destroying less, both are important, but destroying less matters more. So on the conservation side, we need to really accelerate research and help those small, maybe NGOs, which are protecting the nature. And on the destruction side, we need to align human activities, short-term business goals with the long-term goals of the planet. So there are multiple challenges. Obviously, like first one is a funding gap. For example, coral reefs are one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. And in the past decade, humanity donated $258 million, which is less than one Boeing 747. So like in the 10 years, whole humanity donated less than one airplane. This is like crazy. So hopefully it would be better in this decade. then we need to align the short-term business goals with the long-term goals. And this is challenging because you don't really know, because, yeah, like what are those goals? And then currently we are having a very slow response. For example, creation of new marine protected areas, it takes over 5 years. And finding invasive species or mitigating, yeah, it takes time. Then also I think the crucial challenge is we don't really understand nature, because nature is extremely complex and it's very challenging to understand all sorts of dynamics happening in it. So there are also positive examples of us understanding nature very well. I think most of you know this story about wolves in Yellowstone, so I'll recap quickly. All the wolves were hunted down, ecosystem was out of balance. Researchers brought about 300 wolves in Canada, from Canada to Yellowstone, reintroduced them. Wolves started to eat deer, population of deer shrinked, their behavior changed, trees became more healthy. Then once there was rain, the creeks started to appear. Once there were creeks, then beavers came. Once beavers came, those creeks became bigger and became rivers. And those rivers became habitats for 150 species, and even population of bears increased. So on one side, you reintroduce wolves, and on the other side, you have bears and rivers full of water. So I think we can do this. So the question, how do we scale this situation 100x across the planet? And I think the main challenge here is data wrestling for ecologists or wildlife biologists. They're really good at understanding the nature, but at the same time, they're not engineers who can do distributed data pipelines in the cloud to process all of this data. So we need to work and help them with that. And another challenge is data fragmentation. We have massive amounts of data, but it's all fragmented across different organizations, data formats, and it's really hard to access the data. So everyone has their weird obsessions. My obsession is with knowing how information flows through space and time. So if you did a Google search, you get results within milliseconds, but this information travels a very long way, and it's interesting how it works. So I apply the same principles. For example, in my previous job, we used to have lots of different sensing solutions, like pheromone traps, acoustic traps, sticky traps, drones taking pictures, or geospatial data. We fuse all of this data together, and also with environmental data from local weather stations, and try to model it, make sense, create a model of reality, and then we take action, for example, where to spray. So this is basically a data flow in pest management. So similarly, the same pipelines or data pipelines used in harmful algae, for example, bloom. It's just the input might be different. So you take environmental DNA, maybe remote sensing data, fuse it with, I don't know, environmental data like water currents, and then run, again, the same population dynamics, not of Colorado potato beetle, but population dynamics of algae, and then take some action after that. And the same thing, the same data flow happens in creation of marine protected areas. We have lots of sensing solutions, BROVs, environmental DNA, acoustic sensors and other things. Then we try to make sense of this data, join with environmental data, find maybe the cluster of the most important fish, create a polygon around this, and then we create the marine protected area and enforce it. So roughly, the data pipelines are very similar and could be used across ecology. And you could notice that all of them have measuring, modeling, and acting steps. So you measure, understand what's happening, predict the future, or extract other insights, and then take some sort of action in the real world. This is called actually cybernetic loops. This is not I came up with this. It's just part of system theory, and it happens everywhere. If you touch a hot pan, and then you instantly snatch your hand away, this is you running through cybernetic loops. For you, it just takes milliseconds, but in marine protected area, it takes 5 years. All of this is basically a digital nervous system for the planet. On one side, we have sensors. On the other side, we have actions. and in the middle, all these data pipelines and workflows and like modeling. And we need to make this nervous system stronger. We need to have highways instead of scattered data workflows. We need highways of data, and we need to improve the modeling so that we can make better decisions. Multimodality plays a big role in it. So let's say vision could be limited because you can't see fish, let's say, at night in the murky water. Same with acoustics, like not all animals make sound, so you really need to take all sorts of modality. And I think foundation models, they could be, or like multi-modal AI systems, they could be a really good candidate for modeling large ecosystems. And I think we will get there maybe in like 15 years or maybe faster, but it's inevitable. And once we get there, it will impact everything. All our interactions with nature would be changed. So we need a lot of data to get there, and right now we have a tsunami of data. So in like 2018, we had way more ocean data than in the entire previous century. It's just hard to access it. And also another challenge with the data is like, where do you collect it? Obviously, we know, let's say, Global South has less data, or Deep Ocean has less data, but we need to really guide methodically where to collect the new data so that we don't do the same job like twice or cover those areas which don't have enough data. We need to improve this nervous system by transforming from programming 1.0, aka like all the code that we have, into programming 2.0, like end-to-end neural networks, because they could encompass the same systems. It just would be working faster, and we could utilize data more. We can use like transfer learning. For example, models trained on acoustic data for birds work really well on like coral reefs, much better than, let's say, if you train the model on YouTube data. So I think this is foundation models is a moonshot. There might be no big reasons, for example, for humans to be like physically on the moon. But if you shoot for this goal, then like a lot of good things could happen. For example, you can have like maybe microwaves or like other technology as a byproduct. You could have a lot of industries or like businesses aspiring. And so same with foundation models. If we shoot for this mega AI brain which could understand ecosystems, we would have like profound changes, like a lot of businesses would appear and so on. And to get there, we need like a ton of data. And to get to the data, we also need like a lot of tools first, so that we incentivize people to use like data providers. For example, like if you use, I don't know, GB, FIBOT, there are not too many tools. For example, you can't really run the model, for example, against your data and so on. So we need all of this to get there. So this is a bit about wildflow. We'll have 3 components, like tools, data, and models. We're aiming for foundation models, which is kind of open AI for biodiversity. But for now, we are more like a Hugging Face for biodiversity. We can store models and data. This is our main layers. So like this could be applicable to all sorts of applications happening in the ocean biodiversity, for example, or like in biodiversity in general. So at the bottom, we have like sensing solutions layer. We at Wildflow don't do this, but this could be like nature metrics, simplex DNA, and like others. Then there is like a data layer. It could be GB, IBOT, and like other systems. Then could be AI insights layer. I think there are not many companies here. We're hoping to fill this gap. And then application layer is someone taking all this like data and insights and try to figure out, for example, where do you create new offshore wind farms? Where do you extract lithium to not hurt the seabed? Where do you create marine protected areas? And so on. So by kind of having more companies in this intermediary level, we could really boost, accelerate the whole workflow from bottom up. And yeah, we have like the whole strategy about how to get the data. Yeah, if you are aligned with the mission of comprehensively understanding nature and aligning human activities with it, please yeah, let me know. Would be great to collaborate with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei, for your pioneering efforts in applying AI to marine biodiversity conservation. Your work is a beacon for innovative approaches in environmental science. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Leila Kittu, a postdoctoral researcher at GEOMAR. Dr. Kittu has recently earned her doctorate from GEOMAR and the University of Kiel, focusing on the critical role of nitrogen in marine productivity within Peru's upwelling systems. Her research is pivotal in understanding nutrient dynamics and their impacts on marine ecosystems. Today, Dr. Kittu will share insights from her current research, which explores the potential environmental impacts of ocean alkalinity enhancement. This innovative carbon dioxide removal technology could significantly alter marine ecosystems. Her presentation aims to identify environmental thresholds to ensure safe and effective implementation of this technology. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Leila Kittu as she guides us through her findings and their implications for our oceans and climate policy. Let's delve into the science that could shape the future of our planet's marine environments.
Thank you very much. Just get my... Sorry for that. Good. So hi everyone, my name is Leila, and today I will try to kind of convince you maybe why it is very important as we develop solutions that we need to be careful about the integrity of our ecosystem in order to maintain it. So our innovations need to also consider that we are working in a system that we do not want to alter more than we have already done. And so I will kind of my outline, I will start with what we know about our climate today, and then I will go to what should we do about it, or can we do about it. And I put should in brackets there because I think it's a collective choice, and so we all need to be aware, and we all need to say, yes, we need to do this. And then I will talk about marine carbon dioxide removal a bit in depth and focus a little bit more on ocean alkalinity enhancement, which is what I'm working on currently. And then I will come back to my point of research, what we do in order to assess environmental impacts in terms of the studies that we're doing, and what characterizing those impacts means for the evolution of ocean alkalinity enhancement. And so I will start with this first slide here to kind of let you know a little bit about what is happening in our ecosystem. So in a normal ecosystem, we have heat that is coming from the atmosphere, from the sun into our earth system, and this heat is basically, a third of it is usually reflected back by snow or ice, and the rest of it is absorbed by things like the ocean in our environment. And so in a very balanced climate system where there is no warming or cooling, so we're in a very balanced state, the amount of heat that comes in needs to also go out, you know. But we have a problem. So this is the data, real data, showing the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere from the 1970s to currently where we are at. And what you can see is that we have a very steep increase in CO2. And this is a problem, because the gases that we emit, like CO2, which is the main gas that is relevant for climate in this case, it changes the composition of our atmosphere. And so what happens is that instead of having this balance where we have what is coming in can also make its way out in form of heat radiation, we have an imbalanced system. So we are receiving the heat, but most of the heat stays within our climate, within our Earth system, and does not make itself out of the Earth system. So imagine if you receive so much heat, but there's some cover on top of you that you cannot release back that heat. You would overheat. That's what is happening. to our system. And so the ocean, which is what is happening in the ocean is that most of the heat that remains within the Earth system is being absorbed by the ocean. 90% of that heat is being absorbed by the ocean, which is leading to overheating of the ocean, sea level rise, and issues like that. And so CO2, mainly carbon dioxide, is one of the components that is actually resulting to this imbalance, right? And so what happens to CO2? Where does it come from? Majority of the CO2 that we have in our atmosphere comes from fossil fuel burning, and we're not just burning things because we like to burn things. We are burning things because we want to survive. We want to improve our livelihood. So, but 89% of what we need to improve our livelihoods comes from fossil fuel burning. About 10% of that, of the CO2 that we emit comes from land use changes, such as clearing land for agriculture or for human settlement. Then what happens to the CO2 that we have emitted? So what we see here is the sinks of CO2. We emit, something needs to take it. And so about half of what we emit of CO2 remains in the atmosphere. As I said, because of the CO2, we have kind of a blanket. And so the atmosphere is not able to release part of this CO2 back into the atmosphere, back outside of the atmosphere into space, and so it remains within the atmospheric space. 29% is actually taken up by land and the biosphere, and then the other 26% is taken up by ocean. And so what we are trying to do in terms of carbon dioxide removal is to try and see whether we can increase the capacity of the ocean to take up the CO2 so that we can reduce what is in our atmosphere in order to reduce this imbalance that is happening at the moment. And so what can we do about it? Well, we have options. So it's not all grim and bad. We do have options. And so our greatest challenge as a human race is actually to try and restore a bit of balance in our atmosphere. And what you see here is a graph of the CO2 that we emit in a year, and this is all that we have emitted, okay? Currently, we are at about 40 gigatons of CO2 per year, 40 per year that we are emitting. That is 40 billion tons of CO2 that we emit, mostly from burning fossil fuel and land use change. And if we continue emitting, this is kind of where we're going. And as we know now, more CO2 means more warming. So the goal is to stay below 2 degrees temperature increase above the pre-industrial levels of temperature. And so this is the trajectory. If we need to stay below 2 degrees, we have to follow this trajectory. And that means, first, that we need to reduce as much as possible our reliance on burning of fossil fuel. So first, 80% of our efforts in achieving this goal should go into reducing our emissions. But we have to be realistic in that we cannot stop emitting now. We should have started yesterday. But we can't, because there are some industries that are very relevant for our livelihood, like agriculture, that will take a bit of time to decarbonize. And so even when we are reducing our emissions using renewables, there are some industries that will continue emitting. And these industries will form what we call remaining emissions. And so what happens is that for us to achieve this goal, we cannot just reduce, even though most of our effort should go there. We need to actively remove these remaining emissions, actively removing them from the atmosphere in order to be able to get to net negative emissions. And so the removal of CO2 from the atmosphere needs to go hand in hand with reduction of emissions. If you do not take anything away from my talk today, one thing you need to be aware is that we cannot just reduce. In order for us to get to net negative emissions, so as we can achieve the goal of remaining below 2 degrees of temperature increase, these two things need to go hand in hand. And so this brings me to the topic of marine carbon dioxide removal. What is it? So marine carbon dioxide removal are basically approaches that aim to speed up processes that are already happening in nature, biological, physical, or chemical. So we are aiming to speed up those processes in order to take up carbon dioxide that we have emitted from the atmosphere that is causing warming and other global climate problems. And we aim to speed those processes in order to take up CO2 and sequester it in the ocean. They are terrestrial carbon dioxide removal options. Today, I'm only focusing on marine carbon dioxide removal. And so there are a suite of many methods that we are currently looking at, or researchers, industry are currently working on. We have, for example, the blue carbon, which is the mangroves and the seaweeds that, takes up CO2. We have things like fertilization of the ocean using nutrients so that we can increase productivity in phytoplankton that takes up CO2 as well. And today, specifically, I will focus only on ocean alkalinity enhancement as one example of a marine carbon dioxide removal. So what is ocean alkalinity enhancement? Before I go into explaining what it is, I want to say again that alkalinity enhancement is already happening in nature. So when it rains, for example, up in the mountains, there are rocks. This rain kind of dissolves some of the rocks, and then it makes them, dissolves the rocks. And these minerals make themselves, into the ocean, where they kind of change the alkalinity of the water. So alkalinity enhancement, what we are doing is we are trying to speed up that process by intentionally adding substances that are alkaline in nature into the seawater so that we can increase the ability of the ocean to take up CO2. Because remember, we are emitting at a much higher speed than the system can actually take up CO2. Good. And so alkalinity can be, the sources of alkalinity can come from rock minerals, which can be mined and ground, and then they are put into the ocean either via a pipe or as rock powder. And they can also be transported by ships, for example, so some of the minerals can be converted into liquid forms using reactor technology, and they can then be dispersed via a ship where there's a lot of dissolution that is going on. So, what happens when we alkalize the ocean? The first thing that happens when we alkalize the ocean is we are changing the chemistry of the water. And this is very important for the life that is in the water. So we are changing the chemistry of the water. But first, we are changing it in a way that we are introducing an alkaline agent. This alkaline agent binds to the CO2 that the ocean has absorbed. And so we create kind of a gap that more CO2 can actually come in. And so by alkalizing the ocean, what we are doing is we are increasing the CO2 uptake capacity of the ocean. The second, and so this is the basis under which ocean alkalinity enhancement, the change in water chemistry, is the basis under which we can evaluate this technology in terms of the efficiency of CO2 removal, but also the permanence, how that CO2 is bound within the water. The second thing that happened is that we are changing a system. In that system, there are inhabitants. They will respond to the change that we are doing. And this response could be in many different ways, directly, indirectly, positive, or negative. And there are so many connections within this ecosystem, which, as Sergei said, and also Pierre talked about it, there are some services that the ocean provides to us. And so these connections that are currently sustaining us, we need to make sure that as we alkalize the ocean, whatever we do, we are maintaining the integrity of those connections. So, and assessing the impacts of the ecosystem after we alkalize the ocean, this forms the basis of the environmental monitoring. So once we can understand what these impacts are, we can also work with industry, for example, to develop sensors that are specific in order to measure some very important qualities of the environment that we need to monitor as we change the ecosystem. So, my take-home today is that developing OAE responsibly requires us to pay close attention to the potential impacts that might take place. And so, our scientific aims, what we do basically at GEOMAR is we try to understand the system as we alkalize, we try to understand the response, and we push the system in a way that we identify at what point of our alkalinity increase do we change the ecosystem in a negative way. And the idea is that this kind of data can go into, for example, helping to make decisions in terms of how much alkalinity should be added, and then figuring out, is that efficient in removing CO2? Do we need additional carbon dioxide removal or not? The other part of our research is to try and understand any potential co-benefits of ocean alkalinity enhancement, because it could be that it's just not about the carbon. There could be other benefits that come along with it, and so this is a very important part of our research as well. And this goes into the cost-benefit analysis of ocean alkalinity enhancement. And so what we do, my research, we have a natural system out there in the fjord, for example, with all these connections. And what we do is we try to replicate that in what we call mesocosms, which is basically a very giant test tube that we can, to some extent, include what is in nature into those mesocosms, manipulate that water, and then see the responses that we have. And here I show a picture of how we add alkalinity, for example, within our mesocosms. This is a much clearer picture of how a mesocosm looks like. And so what we want to do is we assess the impacts on different levels. The first level that we want to assess is in terms of ecosystem services that the ocean provides for us, is food production. So we change the ecosystem by applying alkalinity, and we see how the changes are transferred from primary producers, which are the phytoplankton, up to other consumers, and eventually to fish. And we try to understand, do we have an impact on the productivity of a system or the service of a system to provide food as we change alkalinity? The other part is that every single organism that is in the ocean has a role, it has a function. And so we want to see whether are we changing the diversity of this ecosystem, but by changing the diversity, are these functions that are still important to us maintained, or are they changing? And that is very important to know as well. The third thing is when we alkalize the ocean, it's for CO2 removal. And so everything that is in this water, all the biological organisms, they will soon die, and they capture carbon with them. And this carbon makes its way to the sediments, which is what we collect here in our mesocosms. And so this helps us assess one component, which is the carbon sequestration. If we alkalize the ocean, are we changing any component of that biological system that would affect the sequestration of carbon? And so what have we done so far? We have tested different scenarios in these mesocosms. We have looked at different mineral types that have been suggested for alkalinity, for adding alkalinity to the ocean. We have looked at the impurities, for example, that could come with these minerals, such as nickel, which can be toxic. We have also looked at changes to the carbonate system. If you apply changes in a very strong design, for example, if you just put an acid, that's a very strong change in pH, or a mild way. And we have also looked at the timescale of alkalinity dilution. So this, if you put it through a pipe, or if you're putting it through a ship where you have very fast dissolution because of the ship movement, what impacts do you see? Currently, we are running a mesocosm experiment here at the Kielfjord, where we are looking at very close to application scenario of ocean alkalinity enhancement, looking at what happens if we put rock powder versus if you introduce liquid alkalinity. And so these controlled experiments and potentially field studies that will come will likely shape the design and also the suitability of how the ocean alkalinity enhancement technology we are developing will be applicable for large-scale developments. And so we characterize these impacts in different ways. We try to understand, are there direct relationships, for example, from the seawater chemistry to phytoplankton or to zooplankton and many other aspects of the ecosystem? Do we see indirect relationships? Maybe the zooplankton are not affected directly, but because they eat the phytoplankton, we might see an impact there, positive or negative. We need to understand that. And then we have cumulative impacts, for example. Ocean alkalinity is happening in an ecosystem that is already changing. There is warming, there is other aspects of the ecosystem, deoxygenation, for example. And so these two things might also affect the response of our ecosystem. And this response could be because there are interacting impacts, but also because they could be additive. And so we need to characterize these impacts in that way, but also to determine what are the positives and what are the negatives. And so there are two aspects I would like to highlight before I finish my talk on what our current studies cannot cover, but should be important when we talk about environmental impacts of ocean alkalinity enhancement. One is that there are cumulative impacts in terms of the different OAE interventions that we could run For example, if you have 2 alkalinity projects doing something in one location, then we need to verify who's doing what if you're selling carbon credits, right? We cannot do this in our mesocosms, but maybe models can do that. Maybe AI can try to help us understand how those cumulative impacts will play out. The other thing is the question of location. There's a lot of talk that the impacts of ocean alkalinity enhancement could be location-based. I agree to that, but only to a certain extent, because the ocean is interconnected. So you might change something in one location, but just because of how the circulation is taking place, that impact could also be realized elsewhere. And so we need to be aware how we can monitor and track the efficiency of OAE, but also the impacts that is associated with them, even if we are only focusing on one location. And so I will end my talk now by saying that I think we need to innovate in a way that strikes a balance. And this is because, as Per said, the ocean provides us services. And these services still need to be maintained in terms of this resiliency, in terms of the health of the ecosystem. And so when we look at how OAE innovations should be developed, I think we need to have this balance between the impacts that we see for climate, for our good, for our benefit in terms of social implications. We need to be aware that they're all interconnected to the biodiversity, for example, of the communities that live there. And so I will end with this short excerpt from Douglas Adams, who I think is a very multi-talented thinker. And he says, we are stuck with technology when what we really want is stuff that works. And stuff that works has to be developed in collaboration with science, with industry, with technology. And stuff that works needs to also ensure that we have ecosystem integrity. So, thank you very much. And these are some of the people that we work with and some of the projects that we are related with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kittu, for your ongoing research, which addresses the crucial aspects of ocean alkalinity enhancement. Your findings are pivotal for designing strategies that safeguard marine ecosystems. Now, please join me in welcoming Frank Ratty, co-founder and managing director of Planeteers. His presentation today will explore innovative approaches to enhancing ocean alkalinity and carbon sequestration. Frank and his team at Planeteers have developed a cutting-edge technology that captures CO2 from various sources, converting it into mineralized water and safely storing it in the ocean, our planet's largest carbon sink. This scalable, lab-proven technology not only captures and stores CO2, but does so by accelerating natural limestone weathering processes from millennia to just minutes. Join Frank as he delves into how this revolutionary technology is setting new benchmarks in the fight against climate change. Let's give Frank a warm welcome and look forward to learning more about Planeteers' innovative approach to preserving our planet for future generations.
Thanks a lot, Ellen, Leila, great. Thanks for the intro. I think you have done my presentation already. I'm grateful for that. 1 second. Very happy to be here. I'm Frank. I'm one of the 4 co-founders of Planeteers. Today, I like to talk about the climate crisis, or how this could also be considered an opportunity. As we speak, we have received some background from Leila. It's somehow clear that global warming has arrived in our minds and our bodies. We see the impacts, whether it's 1.5 or 2 degrees threshold that we need to achieve. What is clear, we as humans have a massive task ahead of us. We need to decarbonize and get rid of 40, very soon 50 billion tons of carbon emissions every year. The way to do, Leila explained, we have to A, get something out of the atmosphere, remove it, and B, to avoid it. And this will have very, very heavy impacts on us personally and on the business environments we are acting in. And we must not fail. Elsewise, this will happen. Environmental disasters are already increasing, wildfires, floods, droughts. This is a scenario which is not potentially arriving, it's already there. We see it every day. And this is causing effects on the social systems around us. People are leaving their homes and escaping to areas where they could still survive, areas like Kiel. And as we speak, there are a couple of million people, refugees related to climate change, on the run. And the places they're running to, you will see an increase of conflicts, more radicalization moving on. People are getting upset and put more pressure on their governments to take action. And these governments will take more action. They put more regulation, again, on people, but also on industry, on the environmental or the economical systems behind. So all of this is an increasing spiral that will move on. And the longer we need to act, the more severe the impact will be. Just imagine, what we have to build as humans is an industry from scratch that has the size of the global oil and gas industry. But where the oil and gas boys had 100 years to build this industry, we have only 20 years ahead of us. There are already thousands of people working on tackling these challenges, but it's only a couple of thousand people. In this audience, there are many, and so are we, engineers for the planet, or as we call ourselves, planeteers. So what we are looking for is, we are working on technologies to untap the largest carbon sink we have on our planet, the ocean. And Mother Nature, as defined by Leila, already has provided the right process. This process is called limestone weathering. It's very simple. Rain falls from the sky, it reacts with CO2 in the air, forms carbonic acid, and this carbonic acid collides with limestone on the ground and reacts into bicarbonate, which runs via the rivers into the ocean. And it remains there for a very, very long period of time, 10,000 of years. This process is nearly perfect. And it will also help to regulate what we have done as humans, but over a very long period of time. It's happening anytime, anywhere, and at large scale. The only downside, as said, it requires thousands of years, so too long for our lives. We have cracked that nut and drastically accelerated this process. So we have developed a technology that enables us to take CO2 out of burning processes. We scrub the CO2 out of an exhaust system, to take limestone and any type of water, push it through the reactor, and render harmless the CO2 within minutes. The resulting bicarbonate water is then diluted in an equilibrated way back into the river, later into the ocean. In a nutshell, we do nothing else than pouring mineralized water into the ocean. You could think, hey, that's too easy. Hey, stop, that can't work. But yes, we have done the math, we have modeled it, we have a lab reactor testing setup organized by our co-founder, Professor Jens Hartmann from the University of Hamburg. We have scaled this technology in our garage in less than a year, and we have prepared the field test installation, which will start 4 weeks from now. So we are moving everything out of our garage in a container and ship it to our first plant nearby. All of this wouldn't have been feasible without great partners from academia, from industry, and obviously also from other startups. Our idea will be as good as it will solve real customer problems and needs. We have two values that we can provide to customers, either carbon credits, which we sell on the voluntary carbon market to offset emissions, or solutions to actually help decarbonizing and coming to net zero industry approaches. In the core, we have our flexible, modular, and scalable technology that can capture and store CO2 and measure, report, and verify this constantly at very attractive cost, both in terms of operational and also investment cost. And depending on the need of the customer, we either take biogenic CO2, for instance, from the sludge gas incineration process, or fossil CO2 and turn it into bicarbonate. To do so, to develop and deploy such a technology that is low cost and highly scalable, you need a team of strong experience and also expertise. We're a rather seasoned founders team, I would say. Jens, both Florians and myself, we bring in 70 years of relevant professional experience from science from industrial processes and from startup experience. And we are not alone. We are 14 Planeteers as we speak, all of them with rich backgrounds and expertise, and we will grow further. This traction, together with great support we are getting from our investors, we will close our seed finance next week, makes me very confident that we can reach our next big milestone, which is to capture and store 1 million tons of CO2 per year by the end of this decade. From there, we will take it further and truly and unleash the true potential of the ocean as the largest carbon sink. This brings me back to Kiel and its fjord region and why we believe Kiel and all the stakeholders could actually be a winner of the climate crisis, or how this could be a climate opportunity for this region. As said, our initial business model will be to issue carbon credits for the voluntary carbon market. We leverage biogenic CO2, for instance, from wastewater treatment plants like here in Kiel-Bülk, and turn it into bicarbonate. But we can also help to decarbonize the industry. For instance, in the energy production processes or other processes that emit CO2. We have a capture and storage technology that actually contributes to decarbonizing the industry. Per and Toste have spoken a lot about collaboration, how to link science, for instance, the GEOMAR industry, for instance, the Port of Kiel, via startups like B2 Sensors or us, and other stakeholders like the Transmartech. This can be a huge opportunity for all of us to jointly fight climate change on the one side, but to also collectively grow as partners on this journey and to tap into new markets. These two together will be the key elements to fight for larger ambitions, like the one Kiel has to become Klimaschutzstadt, so a front runner or role model to protect our climate. And this will be necessary. So considering the start and all the risk and the massive implications climate change will have, like catastrophes, like radicalization of the population, like the impacts on the economy, we believe our technology can actually be a great catalyst to spark positive change, not only to become a front runner for climate protection, but also in terms of linking science and industry, as well as finding solutions to decarbonize the industry. So I'd like to invite you all to get on board, to partner with us and work on this vision today. Thank you very much.
You can stay on stage, actually. Thank you, Frank. So you're talking with the real Leila now, and not with my digital twin today. So my leisure time is over. Good. Can I please ask all the speakers on stage for our panel round? That would be lovely. And maybe one question while everyone is taking a chair, and we build up the round here and sit down. So how was it actually for you to be introduced by not a real person?
Yeah, it was somehow a real person at the end, so it was you, at least looking like you, and as you indicated beforehand, there's not too much of a difference, so I liked it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It saved a lot of time, and I actually decided, because it was, I took so many notes now during your presentations, that gave me the free time to concentrate on my questions. Now, take a seat, please.
Yeah.
So. There's a gap now that needs to be filled, right? Frank? I think you can go here. Thanks, Janis. So yeah, first of all, thank you so much for your very inspiring talks and for being here, really joining our approach of showing where that science can be a starting point. As I faced it in the beginning, I said it's a question, but I think we showed today it is already reality that science is giving the base, the foundation, and very smart people seeing the business opportunities coming from the scientific projects and take the opportunity to work with it. So I noted down a few questions. So and we will also ask the people here in the room to come up with further questions. And we also have the chat that Julia is also monitoring. So maybe there might be some questions as well. And Toste, when I listened to your presentation, yes, I'm here. there's no Elon in the background. So when I listened to the presentation, and I know that you are a real, true researcher, you spent 15 years living on a boat, so you really breathe and live the ocean and science. How much do you already integrate the potential customer needs in the SOOP project?
So I think we still have a long way to go for the customer needs. And depending on who you define as a customer, is the customer the one that actually uses the information that comes out of that? Or is the customer of SOOP actually the provider of instrumentation? So I think we have a broad customer base. And in the end, we really would like to foster the generation of information that is useful for somebody. Could be a society, could be a company, or there could be somebody else, right? I mean, so we are working with our industry partners and organizational partners to foster that. At the moment, we are in the build-up phase of SOOP, so we are focusing a little bit on sensors and systems that are halfway developed. So we know that there's a need for carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is one of our variables that we look at. And I can think of Frank here maybe wanting to understand the carbonate system in these areas, right? So that would be one customer. But also, if you look at the government of Germany, they probably want to have a base for stating something about the carbon balance of Germany in the next round of the climate negotiations.
So two potential customers are actually sitting right to the left-hand side. And my question to Sergei would be, is that something that you see already, that is data you could be using for your own business model?
Sure, that would be fantastic to use. We were discussing yesterday that like how the data flow looks like for creation of marine protected areas. And on one side, you need to have like ground truth observations of where different species are, let's say where your sharks are. And then on the other side, you need the environmental data collected by different other organizations and sensors so that you can model what's happening within the ecosystem. And I think that would be a really good data source of the kind of ground truth data for environmental data to model the ecosystems.
Frank?
Certainly. Certainly, we will need this information. We have our reactor technology on the one side, we have the measurement reporting verification scheme on the other, and this will rely on heavy measurements. So we first model and then we measure the alkalinity levels. And yes, for this, we're partnering already with a small startup, but we will go further, and ideally we find a global network of let's say, expertise and measurement points that provides this. That's happening here in Europe, it's happening in the US, and it's ultimately necessary to bring to life such an ecosystem.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Sergei, in your context, do you envision to pay for that data as part of your business model, or do you expect that this data is available for free?
Longer term, I think we would pay for the data. So I see like one of the potential business models is becoming a data broker. So you like buy different data from different sources, compute some sort of metric, and like sell it further away to the people who are doing like applications. For now, also, I think I'm a big proponent of the open data. So ideally, that would be also the case. So I think we just need to look into different incentives of different organizations. And in some cases, open data approach works better. In some cases, I guess like data marketplace or something works better. So I think we just need to encompass all sorts of incentives and then like create the best way to model ecosystems based on that.
If I'm reaching out to that question again, I was really impressed by this one slide you had with the measure, model, and act. And I think that was really cool how with AI you would like to speed up the entire process of interpreting the data in general. And then I was a little bit like 1 second, because in the end, the action comes from the government. Maybe we know how fast government policy changes will be. I mean, how much do you doubt actually that that will be the neck breaker at one point, because the policy changes that we might need based on the business models you generated will take too long then in the end?
That's a good question. So I think action doesn't come always from the government. So for example, there are like lots of smaller actions happening within each vertical. So for example, if it like a pest management, there is actions of like pest control advisors who advise like where to spray pesticides. Like action comes from, let's say, offshore wind companies decide where to install like the wind farm. That's their action. So it's, governments play a big role. They kind of set up boundaries, but I would not rely on waiting for government to do something. So it's more like actions happening within each area which we want to optimize. So for example, could be, I don't know, BP extracting lithium somewhere from the seabed, and they would take action and extract it. But how do we give them maybe the best information where to do this so that you don't damage the seabed, like if they have to do it anyways. So that's, yeah.
One question to Leila. When we two had our briefing talk, I think you repeated like 3 times, science needs to be independent, which I do agree on. But I did a little bit on research and tried to find out where the original topic of ocean alkalinity enhancement comes from. And I found a study that I think was back in 1995 that was originally funded by Shell. How critical do you actually see, I mean, that point? Because I know that in Norway, things are a little bit different once in a while. I think the oil and gas industry is a big funder of science. So a lot of studies are paid majorly from like maybe the evil companies. And I mean, it's always a balance between we need the money in order to do research on one hand, and on the other hand, we would like to be independent in what we do.
Yeah, so I think the independence comes with which we should be very, we should be free to be able to research these aspects of OEE or other CDR in all the possible ways, the negatives, the positives, the neutrals. And we should be free to communicate them, because I think at the end of the day, we are funded by public money. And so, and in that case, Shell, but the public needs to also have all the information to make a decision about what they think is the way forward. Policy needs to be aware of all the other aspects that if we say, let's go on, there could be showstoppers, but we know them, and we know how we can take care of that. And so that independence comes from being able to speak from the data, from what the data tells us. And sometimes independence can be construed when companies have an agenda, an economic agenda. And that's a very thin line, and that is where my independence statement comes from.
And Frank, I mean, basically what Leila is studying right now could eventually resolve in something that is not so positive for your business model right now. Are investors already include what science says in order to make a funding decision? I mean, you're in the middle of the funding process right now. I mean, you've probably done all the questions. Maybe you tell everyone a little bit about the process.
Certainly, yes. I mean, it's super important to understand the impact. At the end, we are fighting to make something better, not worse. I mean, we are not there to just earn money. That might be a consequence, maybe not, we'll see. But at the end, we are fighting climate change, not our bank account status. And we have Jens Hartmann on the team. I mean, he is out of science, and when he onboarded, he expressed his dream to say, okay, I want to bring something really to life, and I want to move out of this phase where I just, let's say, do research and then always see it stopping somewhere. I want to jump over that bridge and move to the next phase. But he's super critical in terms of how can he keep his independence also from a science perspective, which I fully agree it's massively important, because we need the people and the governments and the regulators to take an obvious and clear decision, and not some which is just biased in our favor. Therefore, it's too important. So I would fully decide to this, and I don't think it's black or white. At the end, if we see that something is not working, what is the added value of producing it? It will come out anyhow. We've seen this on the voluntary carbon market. There was a lot of rumor last year, and the consequence is very simple. The market is collapsing. So that's short-term focused, and that's something we cannot afford to do.
And do investors already?
Yes, when we will have in our seed round, we will have 2 or 3 seed impact investors, and they put this under a lot of pressure. And we put a lot of research material together to also discuss our position and show the potential wins. As you said later, there are potential wins, so we haven't spoken too much about co-benefits. But yes, there's obviously a strong impact potentially also on biology, and we need to see how this works. And they were obviously asking what is the current status of the research, and if we would have said, you know, it's critical, then yeah, we need to see how this works. But it's the same for us. I mean, we cannot invest in a model that doesn't make sense.
And so if I may add on that, the independence of science also provides the opportunity for innovation. Because if we come out with, well, you can apply alkalinity, but there are these impacts that we are currently seeing, innovation comes in to say, how can we avoid those impacts? And I think that's where innovation needs to kind of jump on, is when the scientific evidence says, well, I think there's a limit to this, and maybe there's a different way that we can go about it and still be able to achieve the same goal.
I mean, Per, those are probably 2 very much blueprint examples for the ideal scenario of there's a scientific project and there is a potential business model which basically buys into what you are working on right now with the ocean enterprise. Are we a little bit too slow in Germany? Because I feel that the overall concept has been adapted in other countries way before. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I think it was fantastic that we had these talks right after each other, because we had this more scientific view, which basically raised the question of, is it okay to do that? Or we have many question marks, and then we had a follow-up presentation by a company that says we are going to do it. So there's this big question mark about, okay, are you allowed to do that? What is the regulation? Is regulation very positive towards it? Like, do they support you or do they slow you down? So I would have many questions that we can't clarify here on stage now, but that's a very good example here. I think maybe on that topic there is now more interest and more support from the public, such that we can hope that this is approached quicker than some other topics. Maybe something else, Leila, you just mentioned about the independence of science. This is pure and this is needed, and this is absolutely relevant. Science is not without influence, though. If we look at the ocean observing market, scientists are the major customer of equipment. So there is also some responsibility that scientists have with regards to some of these companies, right? It makes a big difference whether 10 institutes or 5 institutes purchase sensors from some of these smaller companies that we have just talked about, because this market is not so mature. So I think while discussing the independence of science, I think it's also important to discuss the responsibility of science with regards to the market of instrument producers. I think that's also important.
And the market of carbon removal, right? So that's also another market where science has a stake in. So independence is also how you gauge and where you can see your independence working for the good, and where it might not work for the good.
Yeah, I think it can establish a lot of trust. I mean, as we saw last year with the Vera scandal, I mean, if we had scientific monitoring in place, we probably wouldn't have faced that big collapse of the carbon credit market, I would say. Because, I mean, we had projects really that did not do a good job, whilst others were doing a very good job. And I think we just were missing monitoring, proper scientific monitoring, and also interpretation of what was monitored.
And transparency.
Yes.
But
Definitely.
to come back to your point on what do other countries do differently, I think the US has a different approach towards business and economy and science, a more, let's say, there is no obstacle in having these discussions, right? Professors have their businesses besides their normal jobs, and there is more also risk affinity towards going into economy, and I think we can learn a little bit from that. And I think to address many of the risks, it is indeed transparency to help with many of these aspects. Science and industry should talk to each other, and also private-public partnerships should develop more, but a lot of these discussions must not happen behind closed doors. A lot of these discussions must happen transparently towards the public, and I think that is a major difference that avoids some of these conflicts of interests that might be there.
I mean, that is basically buying into the principle of the ocean enterprise. And I mean, how would you actually see that the concept of the ocean enterprise can be spread more out to companies and initiatives? Also in Germany, I'm thinking of the new campaign Mehr machen by the German Chamber of Commerce, and Dr. Sabine Schulz is sitting here in the audience. How could Mehr machen be part of the ocean enterprise, for example?
So when we developed that idea of the ocean enterprise, it was very important that this is not owned by anybody, right? So this is not something somebody owns and can market somehow. This is meant to introduce a new term that should be inclusive, and that is something we really emphasize a lot. So it would be a very good step if people just considered that and basically went out and said, I work in the ocean enterprise, being an environment that is linked to ocean observing and information generation, etc. So it is kind of a thought change, because if we all use the same term and if we all understand ourselves as belonging to the same field, we have a stronger voice as such. And if this becomes a term that is then found in many reports or project applications, this can become very powerful. And we need to simplify our environment also a little bit. If we look at, I mean, Global Ocean Observing System is just the tip of the iceberg. We have so many institutions with regards to ocean observing and local institutions and everything. So we must simplify it a little bit for the public to interact with us. And in that regard, something like Ocean Enterprise can help. And I mean, it's again a sign that the US really jumped on it, right? I mean, we got that support from NOAA, a significant amount of funding, because they thought, oh, well, that's a reasonable thing, right? It's a growing market. We have a lot of businesses. We have a lot of research. Right, yeah, that's a good thing. So we should propel that and fuel that a little bit. Yeah, and so first of all, everybody can use that term. And secondly, reach out to the Ocean Enterprise Initiative and see how that can be brought in there. We are discussing at the moment to also have some European support to this, right? Maybe have 1 or 2 people work on bringing that idea further and supporting it on the European side, and then maybe also followed by Asia or maybe also Africa. These are things to then take it for the next step, but we also have to look where these industries are the strongest at the moment, and that's in the US, for example, also Europe though. And then that's why maybe this was the country to first jump on it.
So it's all about collaboration?
Yeah.
Basically, which is also part of the SOOP project. It's all about collaboration. How do you actually convince companies to become part of the SOOP innovation platform? What is the key benefit for the companies that are also valuable for the project goals that you have?
So science-industry collaboration is very important for both partners, so science and business. I wouldn't really distinguish them so much. I mean, there are different incentives to do the work that we're doing. But we offer something to industry. So for the companies that actually making the instrumentation, we offer test beds, we offer some of our research infrastructure, we offer advice. And that dialogue on what do we really need in terms of the attribute of that particular instrument. So that's very technical. But then we offer to the other companies that actually making the observations or making data products, we offer that dialogue of what is needed. We offer the tools and expertise to grow that market. And I think what Sergei here is doing is really important because we can provide the data. So SOOP is actually providing data, making them available. But Sergei's company here is actually taking that data together with a lot of other data and integrating that data to create a product and information, which is something that is difficult, right? But particularly when you have such very difficult information streams as videos and eDNA and temperature and oxygen, all kind of variables. But with AI and foundational models, there seems to be a way to integrate big amount of, if you want, big data to create some information and predictability that we didn't really have that capacity right now in models and so on. So I think there is a lot of value in that and create new markets for that information. So if you are an aquaculture operator, there are probably a lot of things that you would like to know what's going to happen in the next week or two, because there are management options for you. Maybe not, but depending on what's coming on you, it's good to know what's happening. And I think we need to grow that systems. So therefore, we are in that dialogue with industry and stakeholders on what our needs are, and also make them understand what are the possibilities. It's not that easy to understand what can we do, what can we observe, and then from observation getting the data and turning that into actually usable and actionable information. It's the key.
So, I mean, your main focus from the scientific side is the data collection. I know when we started the project and we were in one of the first meetings, we had a long discussion about fair and open data and what is it actually. Is that something where you reach out to people like Sergei in order to find out which requirements this industry actually have in terms of the standard of the data that is provided?
So SOOP is an innovation platform. It's not a scientific product. Our goal is not to generate scientific knowledge. Our goal is to have meaningful interaction and support for the industry in the ocean enterprise, but also to generate that market and helping that market move ahead. So that is the first part of that. So, yeah, well, what was the second part of the question?
About the fair data.
Yeah, the fair data. So that is a really good keyword, because from anything that's funded by governments or tax money in the end should be open and free. I think that's a general principle. When the money goes to science, we normally have a period where we can work on the data, to produce our science before we make them available. In the ocean enterprise and providing information for society, that is not necessarily the best way. We need to be much faster. So we need to find different incentives. So for all tax-funded observations, they should be free and open and rapidly available, period. But now we're working with private operators. They may have, they may want to be able to cover the expenses at least to make these observations. So we are looking at different models, how maybe a part of the data can be free and open, and another part can be something that they can actually put on the market to sell to Frank, for instance, right? If you make carbon dioxide observation, that would be one model. But even if you subscribe to the SOOP services to making observations, after a period of a couple of years, that data is going to be free and open anyway. But that's just the first part of that. So we are actually right now in a very intense phase of thinking about business models for data, because there is contradiction of having, tax money funding SOOP and actually taking money for that data. But I think there is an interface we can find where we find a compromise that works for both partners. And just another story here. I mean, if you look at environmental data, think about Landsat. Landsat was a satellite that provided really detailed observations from satellites on the planet. And in the beginning, that was sold by the government. And a few companies and scientists actually were able to buy these images. And a few services were developed. And in the end, they said, well, the money we get in from selling these observations are actually very low compared to the price it costs to, set and send the satellites out. So they make it all free. And in a few years, there was hundreds of products that came out using Landsat satellites. And in the end, the benefits for society were so much higher. And that's why you have that, I think, tracking machine of tax money, because you do make an investment with the taxpayers' money, and you get back so much information for society. And I think that is something we should have in mind also when we look at the cost or business model for making ocean observations.
So speaking of finance, I mean, the financing of science is a little bit different to how you try to get your business models being financed. Sergei, where are you standing right now in terms of financing? And then the same question to Frank.
Okay, we're very early stage in terms of funding. So for now, we're trying to bootstrap. We'll have two types of clients. One would be like academia, NGO, and conservation organizations, because here we need to kind of accelerate it, and here they have all the kind of scientific knowledge how to better preserve nature. And then on the other side of the equation, we have like where, let's say, destruction could be happening, or like lots of industrial activities. For example, like offshore wind farms, like when you install them, they could be like hurting seabed, or like where do you, let's say, extract lithium and like other things. So I think it would be important really to have both segments so that you can bridge this gap between two areas. So from one side, you build the, kind of get the scientific knowledge and build the tools which accelerate the research and conservation, and then also use the same tools to make sure we are aligning those activities with what we do, and also we can take money from the destruction side and move them into the conservation side by providing the tools and so on. In terms of the actual roadmap, so we working with a conservation organization in Mexico, for example. We have prototype helping to better manage, let's say you want to create a marine protected area. Then we join in, for example, observational data with environmental, and it usually takes weeks to do this, so we can do it within minutes in just using cloud. Now working on identifying species from the kind of cameras, underwater cameras, because currently people watching manually and trying to figure out where different sharks are. And I think it's 21st century, we should do it better. And another project is about 3D reconstructions of coral reefs. So we've got a few terabytes of data already, and the planning to run a service where people could load their data from, for example, a small organization that is doing reef restoration. They could upload the data. We run the 3D model on the back end, and then we provide everyone a service to inspect those things, and API to further analyze the data. For example, rugosity of the reef, shape of the reef really relates to the health of it. So that's where we are. For now, it's mainly academia, and so it would be grants, but moving forward would be more maybe oyster reef restoration could be a good next starting point.
Frank, your funding looks a little bit more the funding that we know from startups?
Potentially, yes. We were in the lucky position to find two very passionate and dedicated angels. They onboarded last year, and they are both impact-oriented and dedicated significant funds to us. We were supported by the city of Hamburg, where we are based, and also an industry company supported us all along up to here. And hopefully next week then, next Wednesday, we sign then our seed finance, which will be more impact-oriented in terms of venture capitalists. We're looking for partners that really bring this experience to the table, more professional financial services from an investment perspective. And on the other side, a strategic perspective out of a corporate venture VC who potentially gives access to customers or technology providers. And our angels, again, dedicate additional funds, so we are very grateful to have them on board and support us. Besides that, we started to sell our first options on carbon credits. It's very low amounts, but also there we found the first customers who actually pre-sold or whom we pre-sold certificates to. So a lot of trust put into our young company, which helps us to move forward. And yeah, we are blessed by this.
Is it hard for a deep tech company in Germany to raise funding?
I think it's always hard to raise money, be it in an industrial context or as a startup. I would say over the last years, the situation has changed on climate tech. Let's say 2-3 years ago, there was such a, let's say, limited amount of startups operating that the few got potentially easier funded. More and more professional investors have also professionalized their screening mechanism and built risk avoidance schemes, and they look far more carefully into what they invest to, what makes super sense. On the other side, what we also see, I mean, VCs classically invest into software-based models, which good for you because you can scale them at more or less marginal cost, and hardware is a different enemy and a different animal. And more and more VCs try to explore this market, but it's a complete different universe. And the classical questions in terms of scaling, in terms of developing such a thing is different to software. And I guess strategic players might play a different role in that, and that's also where we try to start to build with our financing round. All in all, yes, it was heavy. I think it's always heavy. There's not a free lunch somewhere around, but we are super blessed to have good support so far.
So we still have almost 10 minutes here until we have to close our Ocean Deep Tech Day for today. So it's time to open to the audience for questions. And just raise your arms. The microphone is already there here in the front.
Hi, I have a question for Sergei. It's a bit more of a personal question. So you've worked at Google. And do you think, or what was your experience? Was it harder to build a startup like yours when you work for Google, or did it make things even easier, maybe, because you had this, very secure, I guess, well-paid job?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question. I think I look at this as a kind of a platform where you can join, and it's kind of like similar to surfing. So you can like catch the wave and it will like drive you like very, very high up, and you can do a lot of good stuff, or you can drown in, let's say, bureaucracy and like corporate stuff. So I think Google is a fantastic company, and it's like I have no regrets. I think that was my favorite job, like especially like last 3 years working on the kind of B project. We learned so much, and if we were a startup, I think we would like fail multiple times already, but we were in a good hands and kind of had like a lot of resources to tap into like really good talent and like find the big customers and so on. So I think on one side it's easier to do a startup, but then like within the like alphabet, but then on the other side it could be harder because yeah, like you kind of have some sort of a safety net around you. B is maybe you don't have enough stake in the game. So, for example, if the project fails, you can just like go work on another project. There are lots of different kind of bureaucratical mechanisms. So, for example, if you want to sign a deal between like Google and the farm, it might take like 5 months for legal approvals because of like you need to think of all the data sharing agreements and to not hurt the Google brand and so on. So that could be a bit of a challenge. But yeah, in general, it's great. Yeah.
More questions from the audience? Our tech team.
Yes, hi. My question goes to Leila. So what would you say, how much research is still needed until we see scalable industrial solutions, approaches in your field of MCDR?
I would always say we need more research. Because it's still an early field, and as I also said, locations are different. But I think we can also kind of jump on the power of predictive modeling to kind of help us be a little bit faster. And so I think we need to, as we are still doing research, we need to, as Pierre said, we need to be able to simplify what is really important for OEE, to simplify what is important for environmental monitoring, because we cannot monitor all the things that I talked about there, but we need to prioritize the things that are of economic importance or social importance or ecosystem importance. And I think this is where maybe, AI can also help point us towards the direction on what is really key as a key indicator for our environmental impact when we put alkalinity. So I would say we need more research, but it needs to go hand in hand with innovative techniques like AI and modeling to help us really trickle down to what needs to be prioritized for environmental monitoring. And I think that's where we are at GEOMAR. Our group is now at that stuck stage where we are thinking, okay, how do we report this information in order for it to be useful for guiding policy, for guiding companies or industry in order to know, we need to develop a sensor that can actually capture this process. That's kind of where we are at. Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, sure.
I think one aspect that is very important, and although we are deep tech here, I think it's absolutely necessary to emphasize the importance of something that is referred to as ocean literacy. And this is about people, the public, acknowledging more and more what the ocean actually does. If we look at how much of the goods are transported over the ocean and like how much food comes from the ocean, et cetera, how it affects the weather and all of these aspects, this must become public knowledge, and public must really appreciate these things. And that's why we should not fall short on really communicating that over and over and over again, because a lot of the obstacles that we are facing are linked to that fact that some of the things happening on land are closer to us and closer to public, and by that closer to government than some of the things happening in the ocean. And the other way around, if we put more lights on the things that happen in the ocean, it was, I mean, trawl fishery was mentioned here just as an example. There are many more things. If more attention goes in that direction just by pure natural understanding, people will come to different conclusions.
One quick question.
Thank you, Pierre, for this introduction of my question that I had just had. The question is for Leila and Frank, talking about society or the public. My question for MCDR would be, is there enough involvement of the society right now for all these MCDR measures currently being discussed and already started to being tested?
I can start, yeah. So I wouldn't say there is enough. There could always be more. But I think us, for example, at GEOMAR, we try as much as possible in our research to always have press releases, but also interviews. We will be running an experiment, as I said, 2 weeks from now, and we have the media coming, the IRD, that will report on what we are actually doing. And so that is a way of, the public understanding what we are currently doing and giving them an opportunity to also come back to us and say, hey, this and that. So, but there could also be more. I also know that there's talks of field sites and where OEE can be tested, and that is one opportunity where the public can really involve themselves, because these are test sites that are happening in environments where people go to or relate to in a cultural way, or in a, I like to go to the beach or a small little creek. And so that is somewhere that public can also really be key in terms of guiding how the technologies are being applied. Yes, there could be more.
I do agree. There could be more, and I mean, we're working very closely with CDMARA and Retake as the research project there, and Retake 2 will also take this point of engaging more with the social system, more into the focus. A bit negatively, I would say there's not too much to discuss yet, because all the activities, I mean, you were referring to the mid-90s, so why is it only now that we are testing this, and why wasn't it 25 years ago? And I think we first need to also come into the position to actually test something and see whether it's working. And we have seen some companies also from the US that they have done field tests in England, and they were struggling heavily with engaging public, and that's probably also a common theme which we also have to tackle. At the end, it's not public, it's single individuals which might deteriorate a whole approach, which is good for communities, good for, let's say, societies, but a single person can mobilize a social system to an extent that it's running into the wall, and that's something we need to also offset and see how we tackle this. But it's a clear objective to do more and to transparently show what we are doing. That's why we are, for instance, working with wastewater treatment plants. I mean, they are the, let's say, masters of manipulating water. They have the authority to do so, and that's why we first go to them and ask them, okay, what can we do, and what is allowed, what is not allowed, and how can we also engage? But it's super critical to engage public. We fully agree. And research is the core aspect, and then you have regulation, yeah, especially in Germany.
Thank you, Frank. Nice closing word. We do not have time for a last question, so I take the opportunity now to say thank you to all my speakers today. I would also like to take the opportunity to say thank you to my great team, especially to the marketing crew who did all the preparation work with the AI, playing around and do something new for this year. Maybe next year we have Ellen doing the panel round instead, I mean, as a nice opportunity. And yes, please join us upstairs now for some networking, drinks and some food. Engage with the speakers, ask all the questions you couldn't ask now in the panel round. And if you liked it, leave us a comment, reach out to us, and we hope to see you back here next year at Kiel's Digital Week 2025. Thank you.